Thanks, Yvonne. I appreciate it. Hi, everybody. So I hope that your holiday season is off to a great start. I appreciated all of the insights that Stephanie shared with us. And, I'm really looking at this like a learning experience, if you will, kind of a platform for us to share ideas. I'll share a few thoughts and hopefully they're beneficial. Let me share my screen. And with that, we'll get started. Can you see that okay? Let me know and I'll try to pull up the chat.
That's good, Trevor.
Thank you very much. So, and I'll look back and forth so I can kind of watch the chat and the screen. So let's start out a little bit. Let's start out talking a little bit about emotions. And so it's the Psych Club, right? So I thought this would be a good place to start. Emotions are those positive and negative feelings that each of us experience in a particular situation, right? And so they correlate or connect with different responses or different physiological responses that we have. And so, like, for example, with many behaviors, it involves the biology and the environment. Like all of you have heard about, and maybe we're having a mass exodus already. You're losing me, Trev. No, I'm just saying, all of you have heard about nature and nurture. Like, which one has the greater influence? Is it nature? Is it nurture? If you're a psych student or you've taken some kind of psych class, especially like developmental psychology or something. Well, the same is true about biology and environment in terms of our emotions, right? Which has the greater influence? Is it biology or environment on our emotion? The answer is, well, both of them. Emotions include behaviors, but they also include these physiological responses that come from, processing these events that are happening around us. And then our subjective perception of all of these things that are happening around us, if you will. And so some common feelings, and we're really going to talk primarily about the holiday, right? Like our responses to the behaviors and the feelings that come up around the holidays. And Chris, I know you said, or Christopher, I know you said earlier that it wasn't a stressful time for you, and you shared some reasons why, and those are great. Other folks, they have these feelings of stress and fatigue and sadness, and loneliness and anxiety, all of these things. But to Christopher's point, there are others, 58%, in fact, last year, that said the holidays were actually more fun than they were stressful, which I think is great, right? And some of the feelings they reported were joy, warmth, happiness, belonging. And that brings me to kind of the primary, the place where I want to spend most of our time during this session is what's the key to maintaining these positive feelings? What's the key to maintaining the feeling of, if you find these to be positive, right, because of the subjective perception, but if you find joy and warmth, and happiness, and belonging to be positive feelings, what is the key to maintaining these? And an emotional response has three very distinct components. And there are a lot of folks in this session who are smarter than I am and who are much better versed in these things. So I say that to invite them to jump in at any time if I'm missing anything. Feel free to share your thoughts. But an emotional response has three distinct components, right? Behavioral, and then there's this, again, biological, hormonal, and each of them consist of a certain thing, if you will. Like behavioral component is made up of these like muscular movements that come about or elicit in a given situation. You have other, another aspect that's brought about by the nervous system, and what's the cause or effect of the perception that brings about this emotion. The hormonal component is the role of hormones, in emotional behavior. You've got the brain structures, right, that are part of this. And so all of this, I mean, it's a complex thing, right? Because emotion affects biology, but biology can affect emotion. And so what's the key to maintaining these positive feelings to just get past all of that? Remember that both of them play a role. Biology and environment play a role. And laughing and smiling or thinking about positive or happy thoughts, like engaging in physical exercise, releases or can release endorphins, right? Which help us to feel good. And if you don't believe me, like right now, if you're yawning because I'm boring, you, let me just take a step back and smile. Or you can laugh at me. Or maybe you think I have an accent and you can laugh at the accent, right? But and even if you don't feel like smiling, just take a second to try it and see if you can tell a difference in how in the feeling, the emotion. Is it more positive or negative, if you will, right? Like when people talk about when they exercise, they feel better in part because of this release of endorphins. And so smiling and laughing it's kind of like that. Thinking about positive things can bring about a positive feeling. And that's true of people as well as an event, a job. And if you don't believe me, try it, right? If you want to be upset with your significant other, for example, think about all the bad things that they do or that you perceive that they do. And if you haven't seen them all day, when you see them, you're going to be upset with them. Why? Because these thoughts will impact your behavior. At least for a lot of people. I'm not saying they're not exceptions to the rule. The same is true about your job. If you want to be discontented with your job, then think about all the negatives that come with that. For me, I try to focus on the positive in all things in terms of my relationships with friends and family and loved ones, with work. I try to focus on the positive. It's not to say I'm perfect or always do it, but I try to focus on that, which lets me, and it's not a Pollyanna approach, which is something I've talked about before in these types of sessions. Pollyanna approach being like seeing good where there is no good. I believe there is good in most everything. Not everything. Again, that comes with, if you haven't learned this about psychology, you will, right? There are almost always exceptions to the rule. Or the answer is, it depends. So, in most things, I think there is good, and I try to see the good in people and in life circumstances, experiences, so on and so forth. And so, as a result, I feel like it impacts my behavior. And if I allow myself to go to a negative place, that too can impact my behavior, right? So for me, that's a key to maintaining a positive feeling and a positive outlook, or a positive feeling is keeping that optimistic outlook, if you will. Let me jump to the next slide if I can, because this one I think is important around the holiday season. But reduce the environmental barriers that would keep you from cultivating an optimistic outlook, right? Take steps wherever it's possible to create or cultivate positive feelings or positive health-related behaviors. And for me, a few things that came to mind, take time for you. And it's never too early to start. And when I put in the blurb, if you will, for this session, the abstract, whatever you want to call it, that there are short-term and long-term effects. It really starts right here in taking time for yourself and starting to create healthy habits, because you don't want to underestimate the role a habit can play in helping this to have long-term success. At least, again, in my opinion, my experience, sample of one here. So take that for what it's worth. And if you have different thoughts, I invite you to share them in the chat or to come on the mic. But look at places where you need to increase or decrease interactions. Some people, they lift you up. Some people inspire you. Some people put a smile on your face. They encourage you. Others don't, right? And it's not to say you don't love those folks or you don't want to see them, but it may not mean that, and you have to decide this for yourself. I can't decide it, can't decide or do this for you, but you may love them from a distance, right? If they're sitting at one end of the table, you may sit at the other. Or if they're sitting at one spot on the couch, you may opt to stand in the kitchen and chat or stand outside and chat or whatever. But you take the time for you and adjust the interaction you have accordingly. Do something fun that'll help you laugh and if you haven't laughed yet, let me encourage you, laugh, fake it. If you're not in the mood to laugh, laugh anyway. Fake it, if you will, till you make it, that kind of thing. But take some time. Like for me, one of the things that I like to do if I'm really stressed out, if I've got something weighing heavy on my mind is, I go to a movie or I'll pull something up on Netflix or what have you and just watch a show. And it helps to take my mind off of things. And then I come back and, feel better. Christy, that's really a great question. And if you haven't read that in the chat, I'll read it here. How do we keep such a positive attitude when every day we see in the news somebody being stabbed or shot by terrorists? I feel this is something to ask because the world is changing so fast. And Christy, it's a timely question, not only because of all of, the recent events that have happened, but just today, in fact, right before this session, I saw on the news that there was a student and officer involved shooting at a school, I think in Wisconsin, and it is really hard. And I can't answer that for you or for everybody in this session. And for me, I think my heart can go out to those families in our country and all of those that are impacted. But I'm also reminded for every event where something horrific happens like that, there are all of these other people who are, and it may be a cliche, and I don't mean it to say this way, but I'm just sharing with you what speaks to me, that in those events where something happens like that, you have all of these people who are running to the event, who are running to help the people who are being impacted, if you will. Yeah, Jessica, I appreciate. I guess thank you for saying what I was struggling to say. You see all of these people helping who are whether it's 9/11 or the soldiers who put themselves in harm's way, or police officers or paramedics, and the list could go on, right? And I'm encouraged by those people. And I'm encouraged by the opportunities that I have to help make the world a better place. And again, it's certainly not perfect, and I'm not perfect at it. But I just look for those opportunities, and it helps me to stay focused on making a difference where I can make a difference. And often that's with my family and the people in my realm of influence. And I don't know if I work with some of the folks in this session day in and day out, and I don't know if they'd feel the same way. I'll invite them to share. But yeah, I try to treat everybody, in a positive way, and I try to just look at and see somebody once said, if you put a 10 on everybody's head, you'll notice you'll notice a greater positive impact than if you treat them like they're a 1. 1 being like a low score, or that you do not put value on who they are or what they do. 10 being a very high score, the highest of scores, saying you value who that person is and what they do and who they are and those kinds of things. And so in my mind, and again, I'm not saying I'm perfect at it, but I try to put a 10 on everybody's head and treat them in that way. And sometimes in my own imperfection, when I find that I'm rushing, in fact, just the other day to somebody in this meeting, I had to stop and say, hey, I'm sorry if this came across like this because I felt like I was rushing. And so, I try to say I'm sorry where I feel like I need to say I'm sorry. And a lot of people see saying sorry as a weakness, but I don't. I think if I'm wrong, I say I'm wrong. And if I'm right, then, I'll take that as well. Great question from Yara. Are we valued by looks? I think a lot of people are valued, or people place a high value on looks, but again, I think that's you have people who treat others a certain way based on their looks. I try not to be one of those, and I try not to buy into treating somebody different because they look a certain way or behave a certain way. In fact, I try to just remind myself that, hey, that person is an individual, just like I'm an individual, and they have feelings and they have life experiences that they bring to the table, and I want to treat them in such a way that is respectful and kind. And my big thing, was it Dr. Seuss? Somebody shared one of these, what do you call it? A meme? I don't know if I'm saying it right, on Facebook. Like, I get on Facebook, but I really don't know what I'm doing. But I get on there, and somebody said, in a world where you can be anything, be kind. And so, Yara, that's kind of my thing. I just try to be nice to people and be kind, no matter what stamp, society puts on folks.
Trevor, I wanted to share that there is a radio station here locally that, starting the day after Thanksgiving through the holidays, they play holiday music 24 hours a day. And I typically listen to NPR, which is essentially news, on my drive to work and on my way home. And this morning I said, no, I'm listening to holiday music. I'm staying in, the positive cheer and the happiness and smiling and silly songs from when I was a kid and newer songs that have come out from artists. And I felt like that was a way that I could intentionally stay in that smile, because it can be overwhelming sometimes watching the news, and especially around the holidays where it can be sort of triggering and emotional for a lot of people. I felt like it was a good choice for me to be able to smile and laugh and enjoy that drive, and not worry about all of the challenges of the world, taking that on my shoulders.
Yeah, great tip. I love that. I love listening to the same kind of station. We have that here. Christy, I see your comment in the chat that you live in California. You're not the typical hot person walking around. I live in Virginia, in the other Virginia. It's right on the Tennessee line. You've got like the metro area up in D.C., Fairfax, Manassas, that area, and you've got others in Southwest Virginia down by Tennessee. That's where I am. And you know what? I'm not the typical hot person walking around. It's so funny that you said that. I'll share this with you. Maybe you'll get a chuckle out of it, because it talks about the different times. So I was at some community event, and this kid was running in and out, and he was sweating. Just sweat was pouring off of him. And I said to the kid, I said, "Oh, you look hot, man." And he said, "Oh, thanks, bud." And I'm like, No, I just meant, and so I'm stammering and stuttering because this kid thinks I told him he looked hot. And I was just saying, you look like you were sweating. But anyway, there are people out there who judge us. Right now I have a jacket and a collared shirt on and look presentable. I hope to those of you in this session. If you saw me outside of this meeting, like on a weekend though, I might have ripped jeans on and a t-shirt and a backpack leaf blower where I'm blowing leaves and I look all, I'm sweating, or I probably have dirt all over me. And, you wouldn't see me in the same light. And I just share that because, Christy, to your point, if I go out today with this jacket on, people will treat me differently than they will on Saturday when I have my leaf blower on. It's so funny. My neighbors will wave at me today when I walk to the mailbox with this jacket on, but on Saturday when I'm blowing the leaves, they just go right on by. And it's so funny to me. But I just, you know what I do? I just laugh it off. I just like, we're all in different places. Let me stop there, because really that's, so engage in healthy habits. That's my last one. Engage in healthy habits. Don't underestimate the intentional, regular practice of a certain thing to cultivate a habit, right? That's what's going to have the long-term impact. Dr. Pamela Hardy, she was a colleague here at Ashford of mine, and she shared a quote from Abraham Lincoln. I love it. She said, most folks are usually about as happy as they make their minds up to be. And I like that. And so I would just say, make your mind up to be happy, to take some time to laugh and smile. And with that, let me open the chat up here. You know, come on the mic if you want and chat. Yeah, I'm going to read some of these too. And feel free to chime in while I do. Yeah, Christy, great points. Yeah, Christopher, I was talking about wearing shorts in 40-degree weather. I was thinking about the coach of the Detroit Lions, Matt Patricia, when they used to show him as a defensive coach for the New England Patriots, and he would be out there in this 30, 40 degrees wearing shorts.
I live in Missouri, and the weather here is bipolar. Today it's almost 60, so my teenage son wore shorts. Yesterday it was in the 40s, and I think the day before it was like in the 20s. So it's seasons flip-flopping. We're going from winter to like spring every other day in Missouri right now.
Yeah. Hey, I'll take some warm weather anytime I can get it. I love the spring. Yeah.
Yeah. In Texas, we have the winter Texans, and the winter Texans are individuals that come from up north to want to get away from the snow and 3 months of snow and being whatever they tell us. Because in Texas, we're not going to see no, especially in South Texas. I'm from South Texas. You get up in North Texas, it may be a little different, like in Amarillo, where some of the students are from. So the winter Texans come down here, and they're usually walking around in shorts and T-shirts. But in Texas, in South Texas, when it gets down to 68 or below, you're going to see people wearing big old jackets and jeans, and they're cold and complaining. They got their heaters at 76. So that's kind of, a lot of people associate the snow with the winter time and maybe the holiday season for some. So that's just an interesting thought. The discussion we're having regarding clothing.
Jessica makes a good point in the chat that I want to pick up on. And then I heard somebody chiming in. I'll let you take the mic. Jessica said being over 40 helps too. And we're talking about judgmental attitudes and considering the way that people, look at us and behave toward us. And Jessica, I think that's a really good point. I used to care a lot more about what people thought than I do right now. Go ahead. Somebody else was going to chime in.
Yvonne, I wanted to ask Yvonne, do it affect her mood with interacting with people or your day-to-day mood, the different changes of the weather?
Yeah, there's some studies out in that too. I think that it can get really hot in the southern part of the United States and in South Texas. And I think part of that is because you really can't go outside. It can be like 100, it can be 102, but it feels like 115. And so a lot of people stay inside. So the more you stay inside and you're less active, it definitely can affect your mood. So and also in Texas, there have been several studies in South Texas where, and I think it's probably true of other cities too, where there's more crime committed in the summer months. Mm-hmm. But as a gerontologist, I'm also chair of the gerontology program and the applied behavioral science program. But in the gerontology, we often teach our students that a lot of individuals who are in the cold weather too have a tendency to get sick, and we see a lot of that happening too in the colder months because people aren't used to it.
Yeah.
I want to share one more thing, and I'm going to invite Dr. Harper's. She's actually going to be presenting for us next, but on the psychology 12 days of Christmas, which I think is super fun. She shared some of that before, and I hope you'll be able to join. But just before I wrap my I wrap my session up talking about, and let me put up these references. You know what? Let me just stop sharing here. I'll leave the references up for a second and then I'll stop. But as we talk about emotions and these kinds of things, there are times when you are perceiving something, right? And we talked about the biology and subjective perception and all of these things that are going on that play into our feelings. Keep in mind, and I don't want to get too, too out there for you, but keep in mind there are times when we may perceive something that's happening in the outside world, right, outside of ourselves, which elicits this response, and it could even be below the conscious level. Like, for example, immediately starting to cry when you hear something, or a physical response where something scares or angers you and immediately sends some particular signal to action to you, right? You might not even in the moment recognize why. And what I would say, if you find yourself going there or something like that happens during the holiday, take a step back and say, what just happened here? Why am I, why did that trigger that response, so that you can then have a better handle on that? And, all of us, this is something for me, and I'll just share it out there, share it in case it helps somebody else. I think about, again, we all have our past experiences. We all have our, things that we bring to the table. And one of the things I remind myself of regularly, I can't change the things that happened to me in the past, but I can change my response toward them. And it just, for me, it's like kind of a mantra that I'll repeat to myself at times. And if I find something like, and I'll give you a great example. I was in a friend invited me to a Rotary Club meeting, a civic organization. So we're at this civic club, we're having lunch. I got my collar on, my tie on, and the presenters for the day were sharing about, we're having some kids come up talking about getting these scholarships and all that, my perception, this is not what was going on. This is my perception of it, what they had gotten, where they were at, and all these positive things that were going on in their life. And I started getting so hot, literally hot under the collar. Like I was messing with my collar. And so I loosened my tie a little bit, unbuttoned the top button. And then I finally excused myself, because I didn't even realize what was going on, but below the conscious level, something was going on, and I was having this physical response to it. So I go back. Now, this was several years ago. This was because I've grown, right? This was like, I don't know, 15 years ago. And I think I was working on my master's or something at the time. But I go back to my office, and I just sit down in the chair and I reflect on it. And I got a handle on why I was feeling the way I was feeling. And now it allowed me to adjust. Brittany, I'm glad you mentioned that, because let me pick up on this real, and then really, this is my last thing. I just said that, but really, this will be my last thing. Brittany said, I've got PTSD, anxiety, depression, a couple other things. The holidays are difficult. You know what? And this is a really good point. There's a difference between like the holiday blues that come along, or the stress or anxiety that comes on because of that, and something that is bigger. And if it's more than the holiday blues, all the laughing, smiling probably is not going to help in cases like where there are these issues. And so what I would say in cases like that, don't be afraid to seek out help, right? From your family physician, a psychologist, a counselor, a minister, a rabbi, a spiritual leader, whatever. Anyway, to get the help that you need, right? But Brittany, I love your point in the end. We can't always change these things, but it doesn't define who we are. There is help out there. And so anyway, I want to stop there. I'm going to turn it up. I'll be around if you want to ask questions. I'll put my email in the chat if anybody cares to reach out to me, or you want to talk more about this. And I hope it was helpful on some level. Yara, it was great seeing you smile on camera. Thank you. Hey, that made my day right there. And Kate, all of you, Jamie, thank you so much for sharing.